Hello, and welcome to Seeing Jesus with Paul Miller. I'm Liz Voboril, and I'm here with Paul and our colleague Jon, who's our director for Asia Pacific. And we launched into this new series a few weeks ago, talking about the wonder of Jesus. This ties right in, as you know, to like the heartbeat of our organization. We love to say we like to work on the imagination and the heart, helping people to see Jesus and catch a passion to live as he lived. So that's part of what we're up to here. And we've been in some familiar stories. We spoke about Jesus and Mary Magdalene in the garden after the resurrection. And then last week, we were talking about Jesus with Pilate. So we're going to pick back up into that story today as we proceed. We're going to pick back up sort of right at that climax of the conversation, where Jesus said to Pilate, "Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." And then Pilate's response, which we talked about a little bit, was the "what is truth?" question. But as we were talking beforehand, I was saying to Paul that this listens to my voice. I'm interested in that phrase from Jesus because there's some authority in there. And I'm mindful that the Hebrew word for listen really contains obedience. This is obviously not Hebrew. I don't think Jesus is speaking Hebrew. You guys could tell me if I'm wrong. But, you know, there's that in Greek also, the word to listen has an obey. And even in our modern day, when we want someone to listen to us, we are hoping they will just more than passively skim over what we're saying, right? We really, there's something, there's a kind of authority to that. But so guys, yes, listens to my voice. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, like every parent has told their 4-year-old or 5-year-old, "I want you to listen to me," and they listen and obey.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think culturally we can practice a half listening often.
Right.
We often it's often multitasking that we rejoice in, but I do wonder if our capacity to do that 100% listening is declining as a result of it.
I have often reflected on that. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. It's just said so calmly and it with such authority. And it's so audacious that if you kind of work back through, you're touching his divinity. Like it's just like it's just it's such a sweeping statement.
Yeah, Paula, I think of the word holy. There's a holiness to that statement too.
So just to continue our Pilate dialogue. There's several hours that go at least, and maybe even more than that, because Pilate sends Jesus to Herod. He has Jesus beaten. The soldiers mock him. His wife gets to him in a dream. I think it's Matthew tells us that. Said, "I've suffered much because of a dream." Because of that man in a dream and have nothing to do with him. So, and Romans this is a spiritual age, small s, that, most of the history of humanity has been spiritual. Our age is unusually so. And, that was not just sort of a thought, and dreams were a big deal back then. And so, that would have jarred Pilate, and then Pilate is tussling, so that they've brought Jesus back in again, and then someone from the crowd shouts out the real reason the Jewish leaders have for Jesus, for wanting him to be subject to Roman crucifixion, is that Jesus claimed to be God, and that he's guilty of the sin of blasphemy. And at that point, you can see the two neurons left in Pilate's brain that are not fried connecting, because he John tells us that Pilate is even more afraid when he hears that, and he pulls Jesus back into the praetorium and says to him, "Where are you from?" There's no cynicism in it. There's some kind of fear in his voice that some of the witnesses, John is not likely there, that others have picked up, and he is not. He knows where Jesus is from. His name is Jesus of Nazareth, and he's afraid that he actually has a small g God on his hands. It's a very sobering moment, as if, like, all of a sudden now Jesus has gotten all the way to Pilate's heart, and I could easily imagine in Pilate's mind just what he experienced with Jesus in his first conversation, where Jesus had in effect claimed to be God and acted like a God. Now he's hearing the charge, and he wonders, is this a God?
I think what's neat about kind of seeing the bigger picture in the framework of the narrative, that this conversation is happening in the context of a variety of things, including Pilate's wife having this dream. And so it just seems how God is revealing himself in Jesus is not just a one moment answer. Like, Jesus is not just coming and saying, "I'm God," but it's in the process of a conversation. It's in the process of God moving and having this dream for Pilate's wife. It's all these pieces coming together where all of a sudden Pilate's eyes are kind of opened and in a different way. And so I think that's encouraging in certain ways, that even as we're looking and hoping and praying that people would also see Jesus as God, that God is at work, besides the conversations we're having with people, but he's at work in a variety of ways that are known and many that were unknown, to bring about his purposes and revealing who the Son is.
And then the conversation moves on. Jesus is silent when Pilate asks him, "Where are you from?" And then Pilate says to him, "Don't you know?" So Pilate's irritated at Jesus' silence and says, "Don't you know that I have authority over you?" And Jesus says, "You wouldn't have any authority unless it was given to you from above." This is great. Like, his authority is so real in that, like, he doesn't roll over. I mean, there is this time when he's silent, and there's his silence in the Jewish trial, but he's very much active all through his passion. Liz, you just wrote a reflection on that in a recent article. Do you want to expand on that? I thought that was so good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that often the picture that I have in my imagination, I guess how I came to those thoughts was I realized we hear from people who have gone through some of our Person of Jesus studies around the Passion time. Like, wow, that was really eye-opening. I never saw that before. I never noticed that before. So it made me think, well, what is it we do see? Like, what's our starting point for like our own fuzzy regular recollection of the Passion? And I just thought about how even art has influenced my subtle view of that. And often Jesus, the metaphor that often describes it is like a lamb led to the slaughter. There's sort of which is not untrue, but there is a bit of a passivity to being a lamb led to the slaughter. Some paintings of Jesus in this time, he seems like resigned. He's often very thin and wan, like what? I don't know how to say that word. It's W-A-N. But so there's a certain look, and which his body is fairly passive, kind of being carried through those scenes. But what we do see, I think about a lesson that Paul has called Symphony of Love that looks at Gethsemane in particular, but we just see his energy, him moving, doing, talking here, these lines, just the energy Jesus is putting into loving, just continuing to be himself in all these moments, versus just turning off and kind of letting the tide carry him, so to speak.
Yeah. In sports terminology, it's almost, Liz, like you're saying that it's like he's in a passive defensive mode that we kind of assume that he's in as he goes to the cross. And what you're kind of saying is at times he's very much on the offensive. He's never lost a hold of the game that he's in.
Yeah.
And so he's fully present in the most appropriate ways. And so because he's completely submitted to his Father's authority, he knows exactly what to do in the game. Like he's not surprised. He's not caught off guard. He's not out of control.
Yeah, the coach wouldn't blow the whistle and pull him out. You know what I'm saying? Like last night we watched, my husband's a Duke alum and fan. And so we were watching the game last night. March Madness is what's happening now. And so, you have like playing with your whole heart all the way to the end. Right. And so, the Father wouldn't blow the whistle and pull Jesus out. Not like he had a sub, I realize, but he's in the game till the end. And if he's a goalie, John, like I said, like the passive goalie is just like, well, it's time for you to win, so go ahead. Let's do, like he's like still nimble, moving, the whole time.
And Liz, I want to commend you for a sports analogy.
Yeah, I'm pretty impressed.
Well, it was Jon who started it, really. You'll know it's really a big deal when I pull out the Battle of the Bulge, Paul.
That's great. And then there's this little closing exchange that Jesus has with Pilate, where Pilate's under extraordinary pressure to have Jesus crucified now. The Sanhedrin is against him, and it's not Pilate could lose his life if he would not do what they wanted. It was not uncommon for a upper level magistrate like Pilate to have the local elites appeal to Caesar, and then the verdict goes against the Roman ruler. It was actually maybe 10 years later, or within the next decade, the Roman ruler, I forget his title, up in Syria was killed by Caesar because there was a rebellion of the local elites. So that there was a pretty good level of accountability there, and Jesus says to Pilate, and it's an odd statement. He says, "The one that handed you over has the greater sin," and it's just a kind comment, like he's just taking pressure off Pilate. It's just we don't know what happened to Pilate. Eusebius says that when he returned, he tried to convince the Roman emperor that Jesus has in fact resurrected from the dead. But that is 300 years afterwards. And, there are reports of suicide. We don't know. But I can easily imagine Pilate being racked by guilt, holding on to that note of mercy. It's just so personal. Like it's just to him. Like there's no takeaway for us. Like everyone on the side of truth listens to my voice. That is universal. But this is just for Pilate, which is just so sweet. Like it's just concrete in the moment. And then of course Pilate folds to the pressure. It's either his career and possibly his life or Jesus, and he has Jesus crucified.
Paul, I'm just thinking like this must have been so very memorable to Pilate, like he does this kind of, I mean, he's adjudicating things all the time, I imagine. And it's a result of his position. But to have the person you're sending to be crucified, speak to you like that about your decisions, I'm sure that's just very unusual. Jesus is not acting the way any other human under that kind of pressure would act.
Yeah. And I think Pilate, he was the longest running Roman legate to Palestine, Israel. And he had another, depending on when Jesus died, whether it was 30 or 33. So he had at least another 3 years. So he would have seen the Christian movement start. I mean, it was just too big not to have that happen. And so who knows what, the Coptic Egyptian church thought, had a tradition that Pilate became a believer. We don't know. But anyway, it's lovely how rooted in history this is. And Pilate, he was working to save his name and his skin, and crucified under Pontius Pilate is actually mentioned by a Roman historian, either Tacitus or Suetonius, 70 years later, that it was under Pilate. So it had become ubiquitous even in the Roman world that Jesus had been crucified under Pilate. Like it kind of became his name.
Well, I mean, and then obviously it goes on to become part of the Apostles' Creed.
Yes.
The way you're taking that, like, we say Pilate's name every Sunday in churches all over the world in that.
Yeah. It's just kind of interesting. So, what are your guys' thoughts on so we've looked at Mary Magdalene and Pilate, and it's just the scenes are so different, and the contexts are so different. One is a quiet garden scene, and one is a beatings and a trial. What are your reflections on the differences between the two?
Well, I think it'd be easier to categorize if you had two separate people in the story, one with Mary and one with Pilate. And I think in a normal, very simple, maybe Hollywood kind of story, you would do that. I mean, you would, like, if you have really clear kind of characters who kind of have one aspect about them,
right?
Then it kind of makes the story clear, but at the same time, the story begins to fall flat because we know that humans aren't really that simple. And so you see this complexity because it's the same person in both scenarios, and he could be seen as almost two different people in the way that he's relating to Mary in comparison to the way he's relating to Pilate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a much more interesting character if he was in a movie, because he's more complex than simply this flat, one-toned kind of character.
Right.
Well, and I think, just a particular facet of that, John, right? Like you have in the scene with Mary, he's so almost reticent. He feels almost reticent to make his announcement, right? Like, you might read that as a sort of shy, subtle, introverted personality that is like, kind of reluctant to like get a lot of attention on himself. So, and then with Pilate, though, you have this incredible courage and authority, speaking to an extremely powerful person, full stop. That's always stressful to talk to a powerful person, but then he's talking to him in the context of his own trial and potential death. So that's even more pressure, but he's speaking with so much, confidence and authority and steadiness. So he doesn't seem like someone who's shy.
Yeah.
And I would have, if I was Jesus, I would have flip-flopped.
Right.
Confident with Mary, shy with Pilate.
Confident with Mary. I would have been like, what good is it going to do with Pilate? I'm not even going to talk to him. I'm just going to, And so I just see not only the complexity of the way that he's interacting, but also the challenge to my own heart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 It is, the image from John 20 of the resurrection that John gives us, so we're not reading into it, is the gardener. You don't think of gardeners as like aggressive. He's really that. He's not only Mary thinks he's a gardener, but he acts like a gardener. He's not
simple kind of.
Yes. Yeah. You don't think of gardeners as loudmouths kind of thing. I mean, I'm sure there are. And then with Pilate, the whole question is Jesus a king? And the funny thing is he runs / rules the conversation with Pilate. Pilate follows him from this mocking, "Are you a king?" to seriously, "You're a king," to "What have you done?" to the very nature of truth itself, the nature of Jesus' kingdom, I should say, and then the nature of truth itself. And like and Pilate follows. He's actually led by Jesus.
Well, I think about a lawyer prepares to examine their witness, but the lawyer knows the answers they want to get out of the witness. But it's like Pilate heads in with that kind of a head, but in the end, he's asking. He is like, where are you from?
Right.
He's off his planned questions at that point. Jesus is ruling.
Yeah. So it just like there's so many. I mean, the other thing that really comes through, and it's in every story, but when you slow down and look at a story and the circumstances, it really pops, and it's this sense in Jesus of a quiet center that's stable, and that you don't actually see it. You just kind of feel it, because just like you were saying, John, earlier, with Mary, why is he able to control his joy? Because his joy is just unbelievable at this point. And even his control of his joy is so great, he lets Mary stay in her weeping for a minute or two. And then with Pilate is, how is he able to control his anger and the way he's being treated so badly? So that why, and not just to not lash out, but to be able to be so thoughtful in because his questions with Pilate are so thoughtful. So you come away just seeing that there's something underneath the waterline in Jesus that is really powerful.
Well, I wonder, another way of saying quiet centered is that he's just poised. Like there's this stability about him. So he's not like some of the older pictures of Jesus in various times. He almost seems demure, kind of just little floaty, pulled back.
Yeah.
Like he's actively in the moment, but in the most grounded, I guess, poised way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, Paul, when you say quiet center, I think about the concept of ballast. Paul, you like to take a boat. You have a boat, or like
Good, Liz.
a sailboat, right?
Yes.
What is ballast? Tell us about ballast.
Wow, Liz, I'm impressed.
That's really great. Yeah, my sailboat weighs about 1,400 pounds. It's a little 16-foot thing, but it's got 400 pounds of concrete ballast in its keel. And so it stabilizes the boat. Like when you step onto it, you immediately know if you're a sailor, it's got a lot of ballast because it's so firm.
It's unlike the paddle boat at the zoo that you step into and is like bopping around.
So it's really hard to flip my boat.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus talks about his ballast, and that is his communion with his heavenly Father. That he talks about it all through John. And it's just good for just us to know that it's not, because we tend to put Jesus in a deity box and not see that we are looking at a fully human. So he's describing it as a whole new way of being human, that you can love a bully like Pilate. You don't have to lash out. And there are times where you need to control your joy. This is especially good for me, that I could bubble over with joy and not leave space for other people. And there's really a way of living here that changes how you relate to your outer circumstances.
And that's part of, like, I guess we tend to see the outer behavior of a person as like coming from their personality and being just tending to relate in a certain way. So Jesus's difference here is like, it shows that it's not simply his personality coming out there. It's governed by something more complex than that.
That's right.
So, and that's part of this whole idea of wonder, right, Paul? Like, just to see Jesus and notice these things, which are really kind of at that, how does he relate as a person level, which isn't always how we read the Gospels, to note that.
Right.
But that's part of the texture, I think, that we're trying to get at in this series and to unpack, to notice. That we're wondering about and want to help you listeners wonder about too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the ballast that you mentioned, Paul, that he's fully at rest in his Father's will and love for him. It's not like we don't know that. Like, he says that pretty clearly in the Gospel according to John at different points. And so it's easy to bypass the significance of that and how it not only centers him in this way, kind of in this, like, not in a lofty way, but you see the texture of it come out in the way that he's relating to people. And so to actually flush those words of Jesus about him, and he and the Father being one and being fully at rest in his Father's love, when you connect that with the two stories that we just looked at, then you see how it flushes itself out into everyday life. And as you mentioned, what it looks like to be fully human in the best and the greatest of ways in real life. And it centers in this ballast, but it shows itself in such profound ways.
Right. And just going back to the ballast, the stepping on my sailboat, you can feel the weight of the boat, because your foot doesn't go down, it just goes down a little bit, and it's that but you don't see the ballast. It's literally below the water line.
Yeah.
And you'll see that in people's lives who walk with the Lord. You'll see that ballast where their ability to listen during a hard time or to care, to not be self-preoccupied. What you're seeing is the presence of Christ in them. One final thought on that is that it's just easy to miss kind of the category of love, particularly with Pilate, that we're looking at here, is Jesus is loving an enemy. And it's a category that almost makes no sense in our therapeutic age, that you would actually care for and be concerned about someone who despises you. And how thoughtful Jesus is and how he loves his enemy. Like, he moves towards Pilate. And it might be worth just reading. Liz, could you just read briefly some of Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount?
Sure.
On loving an enemy.
But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same?
Yeah. And what I love about that is that Jesus' listeners were loving, but their range was narrow. And you'll hear us say that over the next a number of episodes that like they loved within their tribe or they loved nice people, but not mean people or people that made them discomfortable, or people that made them uncomfortable or whatever it is.
Right. I always say you love the people that are natural to love with your personality, right?
That's correct. Right. The people, like I love people who laugh at my jokes very easily. Yeah. And that's the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus is living that sermon. It's like he's doing that. He's loving someone, praying for them. We know he prays all the time. He's praying his way through this conversation, and treating him with dignity. And it's just so different from that's the Sermon on the Mount from the sermon that dominates our age, which is the protection of the self. And again, that you do need to say no. Jesus says no to a lot of people. I'm not saying any of that, but that whole idea of boundaries is so dominant. And again, there are times you need to do things for yourself, but that because those are such deep echoes in people's lives, they're part of their ballast, that when an enemy steps on the boat, their boat sinks or they flee.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think I'm working the ballast illustration too far.
I get motion sick, so I'm grateful for the ballast. I think, it's just that over and over again, as we look at Jesus and talk about him, I feel that that stretching of the imagination, right? The bigger imagination. So here again, Jesus is loving an enemy in a way that really stretches our natural imagination for the moment. And that's like, that's a good stretch. It's like, it's where he wants us to go. So, all right, we will be back again in another couple of weeks to continue this journey of exploring the wonder of Jesus. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back again soon.